Welcome back, true believers. I'm Thomas Brando Greenman, and you're listening to the You're Not My Father podcast. Everyone could use a little fatherly advice, no matter what your age is. So we're here to provide that advice, wisdom, humor, motivation, and inspiration to help you live a better life. So without further ado, let's do this. Welcome back to another exciting episode. It's so exciting, I just said it because that's what I normally say. It probably isn't going to be that exciting, so calm yourself, calm down. You don't want to get too excited. This is meant to be a calming, relaxing, inspiring podcast, if you will. I'm your host, Thomas Greenman. I am from Alaska, mostly. And today I am subjecting myself to an interview with none other than myself. So here are some questions that I have asked other people over previous seasons, and I'm going to do it to myself. I don't know if I've actually done this or not. For all practical purposes, if I did, it was probably an underrated episode. Most people didn't listen to it. So here's another chance. Before I start this, I think it's a good time to point out the book reading exercise that I probably have referenced a couple times on the show, where you read one of your favorite books every so often. The whole thing, not just part of it or pieces of it, but the whole thing. And the reason is because your perspective has changed, hopefully, that you're growing and evolving as a person, I would like to think. And you have a different take on the characters and the people that are involved in it. And so, so I would hope that that you've done this before, that you've read one of your favorite books again. One of my favorite books is Wizard and Glass by Stephen King. It's one of the books in the Dark Tower series. And I've read it countless times, and it just speaks to me as that book. And pretty much every time I read it, I feel a little bit different about the perspective and the way the motion picture tends to roll in my mind. So if I have answered these questions before, it was probably a few years ago, and now it's 2023, and we'll see what these questions take us today. So question number 1. How important do you think having a father in your life is? I can definitely tell you that it's extremely important to me. I didn't have the privilege of having my dad in my life a lot, but the times that he was there, it really cemented who I was. It formed and changed me in a lot of ways. As a young boy, I don't think I really looked up to a lot of different people that were in my life personally, that weren't on the big screen, the movie screen, or TV, or in books or whatever. Those larger than life people, even for an adolescent brain, why I wanted to be those people, the reality of it is that I wanted to be like my father in a lot of ways. I may not have wanted to have the same job as him, but I felt like from the way he walked to the way he talked to the way he cleared his throat, several different things, I feel like I picked those up. Now, do I sound exactly like him? Probably not, but there's so many different mannerisms and things that I picked up from him, and it was a love and an appreciation that those things came from. And and you can hear the traffic and the donor cycles riding past my office. It's wonderful. I think besides just the imitation being the highest form of flattery, I think the ways he acted, the ways he approached life, a lot of that, I think, I guess I was intelligent enough or intimidated enough to where maybe I didn't want to do some of those things, but there were certain things that definitely kind of helped me out. But I'll also give the counterpoint to that. In the times that my dad wasn't with me, I kind of had these supplemental fathers. And I think I talk about that in other episodes. These substitute fathers that, imaginary possibly, whether a TV show or a movie, but they were these male role models and figures that played heavily into, I guess, what makes me me. And it's an interesting thought, I think. But certainly there was individuality there as well. But to answer the question, I think having a father in life is extremely important. And having a son who has spent his whole life with me and hopefully will continue to spend all of my life with him, I hope that he learns from me. I really do. Question number 2. Did you have a father or father figure in life? And if so, what were they like? I kind of answered that for the most part. So obviously what we just talked about, I think probably the biggest father figures in my life were the revolving door of fictional or non-fictional characters, fathers that showed up in my life. And on the flip side of that too, I think there were a lot of mothers that, not just my mother, but other mothers and other mother-like figures that really kind of shaped me in that proverbial fatherly figure sense. That gave me clues as to what I should do, and what I should be. Biblically speaking, it's kind of a challenge because, a father figure in that role model is the de facto place that you should be. But growing up there were not a lot of, there were no uncles, no grandfathers, and a lot of other friends and whatnot. They didn't have fathers, or their fathers weren't caring about their lives. So, I think the substitute father role for people that don't have one in their life, if your mother has a boyfriend, is that person willing to do that? My mother didn't bring her boyfriends around, so I didn't really get to see that. There was one guy, who, he was a really good guy, and I really liked him a lot. I appreciated him, but I don't know. I think my mother kept him at arm's length and didn't really want to pursue that relationship, whether I think he did. I feel like that if they had, that he would have been a very positive role model in my life. But as it was, it wasn't. I think probably the bigger role models in my life were, as funny as it may sound, like the James Bond of movies, Pierce Brosnan, Sean Connery, that type of deal. It wasn't to say that the misogynistic characteristics kind of played through. It was more of kind of taking pieces from these fictional characters that made sense. It wasn't it wasn't like rote fan type service, where I was just like eating it all up. Well, no matter what you say, I'm gonna do exactly that. It was more like this resonates with me. I'm gonna take a piece of this. And I watched this movie and I'm like, this character, I like these pieces. And so I kind of assembled who I was based off of that. So kind of think of it as like going to Lowe's and making yourself out of the pieces that you like. Yeah. What's the best advice your father ever gave you? I am not sure entirely. I don't think there's one specific piece of wisdom that he ever taught me that ever really stood out. He gave me a lot of info. He gave me a lot. I would guess that if I was pressed to just give you one phrase that he probably said, and paraphrasing it probably heavily, was if you know that something's trouble, don't go there. Don't do it. It's something that I've given people advice as well. I mean, let's suppose you're going to go out some night and you're like, hey, I'm going to go out this club, but there could be a fight, there could be something else or whatever. Why go? You don't have to. If you know that something is potentially going to happen there, don't do it. Now, it's not to say that he gave me like you can't wander out in the world because something could happen. But, if it's highly likely that it could happen, probably not something that you want to do. What's the best skill your father taught you? Wow. I'm not sure if I really thought about these questions from me answering it. The best skill my father ever taught me, I don't know. I mean, cooking was something that he had a way of. He was a good cook. He was a really good cook. He didn't get very fancy with it. He was just kind of like a little this, a little that, do this, do that, shazam, here you go. And that's something I definitely picked up from him. So it was probably that aspect of it. Maybe the grilling part. That sounds really kind of benign in some ways. That would be what he taught me. He taught me a lot about guns and firearms, and how to think. Probably one of the greatest or worst conversations he told me was thinking several moves ahead, like a game of chess. Like if you're driving, you have to think several moves ahead. You have to see what's going on, and really kind of applying that wisdom to other things in life. So I would say that. How important is family to you? It's all important. Very, very important. When I was a kid, there were so many different things I wanted to be. I wanted to be an astronaut. And then one day I was sitting at home. I was sick, playing hooky, one or the other, and the space shuttle blew up. And that kind of destroyed that dream of being an astronaut. And then at some point after that, I kind of thought of a military career. And I didn't want to do that because I'd seen military families fall apart. I saw my own family fall apart from that. From law enforcement, military, and just seeing that wasn't really a great lifestyle that encouraged family. So I gave that up. I went to college for psychology, and I thought that was probably, I could talk, I could listen. And I felt like I really tried to get inside what people's issues were. And more importantly, I really cared. And so I felt like psychology was probably a good thing to get into. And more importantly, I felt like that was something I could have a family with. I kind of envisioned like having the home office where half or some part of the house was the psychology room. That was my office where I met patients, and I could have lunch, and it was just kind of one of those idyllic type of scenarios. And well, needless to say, things got off course from there. But important is 100% important to me. The most important thing. Everything else in this life, I could give away. I may not like it, but I would do it all for my family. How often do you talk to your father and family? Not enough. So my father passed away last year, and I felt like we probably didn't talk enough. Granted, a lot of the things that we would talk about it wasn't like the everyday thing, like, hey, what did you do today? I did this. Oh, that's cool. Well, tell me some more about that. We didn't really get into that. I think a lot of the conversations I had with my father were big picture stuff. Now with my mother, I feel like I can talk to her and talk to her about a lot of different things. And interestingly enough, I talked to her today, but we do not talk very often at all. But with my kids and my wife, all the time, every day. Next question. If your father wasn't a part of your life, what skill would you wish you have learned? Do you wish you would have learned? Sorry. I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like my dad wasn't that big a part of my life and whatnot, but here's what I feel like I need to say. I really wish that we'd gone hunting more. I feel like that would have been something that he enjoyed doing, and we just never did it together. And I think I would have learned a lot, and we would have bonded a lot over that. And so it's one of those things where I want to take my son hunting. Do you regret not having your father being a bigger part of your life? I do. But I also don't want to go back in time and rearrange things and change what happened. I really like where I'm at, who I'm with, my family, everything. I really felt like this is all part of God's plan, and I'm happy with that. So what are the top 3 traits you think make a great father? I would say the top 3 are probably going to be pretty simple stuff. Consistency. You're there. I think a lot of being a good father is just being there for your family, your kids, in the morning, in the evening, in the middle of the day. You're the rock, that foundation of that aspect of your family. I firmly believe that God is the big rock for everything, but there directly, you need to be that person. You need to be the shepherd for the family. You need to be that person, as hard as it may be. I would say the second big trait is love. I'm going to go straight for the easy answers here. Because they are pretty easy, is love. As father, you need to be loving. You need to love your kids. Definitely love them. Be able to forgive them. No matter what happens, you still care for them. You have compassion. You're thinking about them. You want something better for them. You love them. I think it's a very Christ-like thing to do. Love. I think that that's the number one. But here it is, it just came in at number 2, but it's really number 1. Number 3, I think understanding. You really have to try to understand your kids. I think that's number 3. You need to be able to put yourself in their shoes, no matter what. Doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. Doesn't mean that they're making the right choice, but you need to be able to understand where they're coming from, being able to relate. So I would say understanding. What are the top 3 flaws that make a bad father? I think it's really the reverse of everything. Well, maybe not. No. Maybe on the first 2. Not being there is a huge flaw. It's something that you see a lot of fathers. If a father is having a flaw, there's a flawed relationship, them being there is usually one of those. I would say number 2 is not being a loving father. So, yeah, kind of the reverse on those 2. But I would say number 3 is not respecting people in the family or themselves. I think respect has a long way to go. Even beyond not understanding, I think that you can be a good father and not understand people. You're just not that cluey into it. But respect doesn't take wisdom to provide. You can be respectful and be salt of the earth people that don't understand a lot of things, but you can be respectful. And having respect for other people is a big part of it. So I think that's it. How old were you when your father gave you advice on sex? And what was his advice? I don't specifically recall any advice on sex at all, except for 2 incidences. So first one, I think I was 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. We had satellite dish, early 80s. Early 80s, as you can imagine, most movies had what? Guns, boobs, cursing. So 3 things that probably are not good for kids. My mother understood most of that, and I was watching the stereotypical 80s movie. Nothing really horrible, but for a kid, subjective. And she walked by and told me to turn the TV off, and my dad kind of led her out the door. I think they were going on a date, and he was like, let him watch it. It'll be good for him. And you could see the kind of expression on her face. But of course, at my age, being the kid I was like, all right, this is great. Would I do that with my son now? No. But it was a different time then. That's probably the one thing maybe that he gave us on advice. Number 2, I think I was in college, and I was over at Dad's house, and I was going out with some girl, and he was like, use protection. He gave me a handful of condoms. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. And I think he mentioned something about, make sure you use them. They don't do you any good, and whatever. And that was probably about it. So he wasn't too adviceful on that. How old were you when your father gave you advice on marriage, and what was his advice? I think he, him and my mother going through a divorce, he was always dropping truth bombs, from his perspective on, marriage and how things should be and how things shouldn't be. Definitely a lot more of the latter part. And yeah, that was him. So I mean, I probably caught that at a very early age, like I said, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. And yeah, I don't remember anything very specific about it. I think he really enjoyed the women that I had in my life that he met, for the most part, with the exception of a few. And I think he was just very supportive of it. And I think he would say stuff like, just treat her right and all this other stuff. But I don't think he really dived into, here's what it takes to have a good marriage. Because in reality, I don't know if he was married 3 times. I don't know if he really got the first 2. In the third one, I think it was just a really good match, and maybe he didn't have to work so hard on it. I don't know. It's hard to say, but yeah, there you go. Can you tell me about a time that your father was there for you when no one else was, and how did he help? Dad would write me a lot of letters from different places. So after my parents got a divorce, he worked for the sheriff's department for several years, and then he went off to Pacific Northwest, Alaska, Seattle, the Middle East, and other places, Singapore, whatnot. And I would get a letter every once in a while, and I wouldn't say that it was. I wouldn't say that he was there for me per se, but this is before we really had ubiquitous use of cell phones, so a letter was pretty good, even before arguably some of the internet. And he'd send me a letter, and he would give me some really good advice, and a lot of pep talk about certain things and other things that were on his mind. And in some ways his letters were better ways of him communicating with me than in person things were. And I would read those letters kind of over and over again, and pick up different stuff for him. And in a lot of ways, it was like, he was telling me the same advice again. But those letters definitely helped out a lot of times. I feel like if he had never written those letters, I probably would have been very lost as a person. I don't think I would have had the morals that I had, or the integrity, I guess. I could really see where I would have slipped down a slippery slope into a lot of sin, and probably had given up on being a good person. So yeah, that was him. His letters were a big deal to me. In movies and television, there's a tendency for father figures to be portrayed as absent or negatively. Do you think this holds true to real life, and why or why not? I do feel like father figures can be absent a lot. And, being a father now, at my age, and having come down this long, winding road and listening to other people, it definitely feels like fathers have this weight to carry with things in general. And nowadays, I feel it more that that men don't really support other men. And whereas women kind of do. I feel like, women will commiserate with each other, and it's okay to have feelings and whatnot. But with men, they may commiserate and go to the bar and drink and whatever, but it's a different type of camaraderie, and it's definitely not a very supportive mechanism. Men are just not there for other men in general. Sometimes, but I feel like it's either something that men have done to themselves or something. But yeah, I would say that a lot of father figures do tend to be absent in general, and certainly in movies and TV that seems to hold true. My men's study group that I'm a part of, these men love their families. They want to be with their kids. And they're not afraid, mostly not afraid to expose their vulnerabilities and talk about their trials and tribulations and their misgivings. And it's been a beautiful thing. And I feel like that God has an amazing plan for us. I know he does. I guess where I'm going with this is, I feel like if you have God in your life and he's at the center of your life, and you have a really good church family or a religious family that sticks together, I feel like the father figure ideal that is portrayed in movies as being absent and stuff like that is so far away from that it's kind of a fiction. So I guess it depends on your point of view. But just because fathers are absent doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. I have a son who, we've sort of talked recently. He sent me a message the other day, which was pretty awesome. It was just one word. It was, what's up? And I was like, oh my God, he wrote me back, and what do I say? And, do I come off as like, hey bro, or the dad or whatever? So I was like, I don't know, fly casual, as Han Solo would say. So I kind of did that. He hasn't written me back yet, but I'm open to that. But to me, like I'm very aware that to him, I am that absent father, and I probably have been portrayed negatively. So I feel like in a lot of ways I am that stereotype to him, and that's real. That's real life. Number 18. So these are interview questions that I had for other people. So we'll see how this one washes with me. I use the word father as an honorific in a role that most people are very familiar with. Yep. I believe anyone can be a father regardless of your sex. Nowadays, maybe not so much, but I get where I'm coming from. Can you tell me of a time you met somebody who definitely gave off the father vibe? So yeah, like I said before, there's been a lot of very positive women that have been in my life, that were kind of like substitute mothers, but, also some of them that were very more father-like, and you need to do this and you need to do this, and, kind of what you expect from a father. And, I miss those people. I do. I still think about them, and some of them are no longer with us, but, God, I really did love them a lot. They're really great people. And some of them I don't have a good relationship with anymore, maybe not at all. And, there's one in particular that just, I think I know why, but it wasn't my fault, and or probably some of it, I don't know. Kind of a really weird and complex situation, but I never forget these people. Like, they were so great to me, and just because they were a woman doesn't mean that they can't fulfill the love, the understanding, and being there for somebody in that parental way. And yeah, it makes me sad, but you know, it's all part of the plan. There you go. So last question. So our show is more of a good vibes only type of show for fatherly advice that sometimes isn't always good vibes. Is there any particular advice that you'd like to share that you think is important for people to know that isn't commonplace? And I have this little note in here. Try to steer the guest away from hardline political, racial, religious, musical, food, views. You know, and note, I hate tomatoes. Those tiny red globes of acidic filth. So I don't really hate tomatoes. I just don't like tomatoes that haven't been chemically transmogrified or chemically discombobulated, like with vinegar, like ketchup or pizza sauce or other stuff. But whole chunky hunks of tomatoes, whole or otherwise, are verboten, no good. I'm not into that type of stuff. Particular advice that isn't commonplace. You know, I'll give you one. I feel like fathers in general, parents in general, at least from my understanding, teach kids a lot of things, you know, about life, you know. But I feel like a lot of it is not the practical things. So, like, your parents might teach you how to wash dishes. They might teach you how to wash your clothes or whatever. But a lot of times I meet people who that didn't happen. And stereotypically, it tends to fall into the guy versus the girls type of scenario. The mothers did teach the girls how to do these things or keep house. And the fathers didn't teach the sons how to do anything except for go hunting, work out, drink beer, you know, all those stereotypes. But sometimes stereotypes are, for lack of a better word, you know, somewhat based on the truth. But out of all those different things and everything we just talked about, I think two things are probably things that parents should be teaching their kids. And the first one is personal finance and making good business decisions and how to run a business and all of that stuff. That big nebulous world. I feel like schools don't do a good job of this. I feel like in high school, home economics sounds like what they should be doing, but there really should be like a basic business class, you know, where they're teaching, you know, profit and loss, you know, what a business does, how it can make money, you know, how to manage people, how to work hard, succeed, how to educate yourself on different things. I really feel like parents need to instill that into their kids from an early age, because you can teach your kids all these different things and then they get out in the real world and it's like, all right, go for it. Go for what? Because I feel like college is not doing that. And if it is, at what cost? It's a huge cost. It can be crippling. Not just that, but the mere act of having to go away somewhere or spend all this time and learn these things all at one time and not get the hands-on apprentice type of approach of things where like you're going to work side by side with somebody that is doing these things, and you're going to learn how it gets done and the subtle nuances and that type of stuff. So I think that is probably one of the biggest uncommon pieces of knowledge that fatherly advice should be out there. Fatherly, motherly, parently advice. And I would say the second part of it is, and yeah, I keep saying that I'm not trying to take religious stances here on the show. And every episode now, it seems like I am. But I really feel that you need to have faith. That your parents, you need to teach your kids about faith. And if that's not you, that's okay. You can stop listening to this podcast at any point in time. I still want you to. I still feel like even if you're not a believer, you can listen to this podcast and learn smart stuff. But if that's not you and you just don't want to do that, I totally understand and I support you for it. You totally have the ability to do that, and that's okay. But if you're going to keep listening, then I'm going to keep on talking about that. But I feel like God's plan is the right plan. Now, I'm not going to go too far in defending God's plan outside of a few things, but here's what I will tell you. God's plan is interpreted in so many different ways. So if your view on religion and God is based on the actions or the interpretation of somebody else, I encourage you to do it yourself. Go to the source, read it yourself. And when I say read it, I mean like try to really, truly understand context. And not just context, but parable, everything else. I was lucky enough to attend a class. It was I think it was like 7 or 8 week class on how to study the Bible. And it was incredibly eye-opening. Not just from the fact that I learned how to do what I just told you I think you should do, which is, read it yourself, learn for yourself, but to, having that closer connection with something higher than yourself. And I'll kind of try to stop there because I try not to be religious on this show, but hey, if I'm not your father, I don't know who is, but read. Look at it for yourself. And just some food for thought, nowadays, how can you really believe most of what's being said? You have to look for the facts. Fact check, truth check. Go to the well. Drink directly. Don't let somebody tell you what it tastes like. Don't let somebody else's opinion sway you on what it is, because I'm sure that we've all been there before where somebody said, I didn't like that movie. It's not any good. You watched it, you were like, I love that movie. Or, something about some particular food item. That tasted terrible. It's horrible. And you're like, I love that. Or hypothetically, we're coming full circle here. Now watch how I loop this up. As you get older, your perspective changes. So just like what I was saying at the beginning, like your perspective on that book changes. Your perspective on life changes. It really does. And your taste buds change. So what you may have not liked before may taste good now. There's a lot of that type of stuff in life. And I think if you look within yourself, you'll understand that those specific things are true. Your perspective does change as you get older. Your tastes do change as you get older. Your perspective on books changes. There's a lot of stuff that changes. So do yourself a favor. Go to the well. Drink for yourself. See what you think. And drink deep. Don't just like give it a taste. Don't do what my kids do whenever it comes to new food. Oh no. Give it a little bit of time. Swirl it around. See what it tastes like. Give it a good try. Like you went down that road. You went down that path. You got down there. You saw a lot and you still weren't getting it. But at the same time, I feel like Jeff Goldblum here. Wait, but yes, and yes. And if you go down that road a little bit longer, maybe it's not your time to do that now. Maybe it's going to be later. So think about that. Maybe it's not today. Maybe maybe you need to drink from that well later. I certainly know that when I was younger, I wasn't ready. And you're not alone if you're not. So that is my proselytizing for today. I hope that you found this interview as informative as I did. I certainly found that some of my answers to my questions were a little bit interesting, a little bit more interesting than I would have thought they would be. So there you go. So as far as the podcast in general, I feel like it's me. It's just little me. Pay no attention to that man behind the green curtain. It's just him running this podcast. I definitely want to do more things on this podcast. I know that it's kind of infrequent that I do this. Yeah, it's supposed to be like at least once a month. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Some months, a little bit more or less, but I'm trying to build in some habits here. So if you keep listening, I'll keep making it. And so far, it seems like some people are listening. So thank you. I love you. Believe in yourself. Don't fight with yourself so much. Fighting with yourself is a waste of time. I love you. I need you to be more in love with yourself and to respect yourself and respect other people. It's not that hard to do, but you got to try, and somewhere you got to try to do it. So that's it for me. I'm going to go home and love my family and enjoy some food that may or may not be that good. It might be a smoothie. It might be a frozen food item that got thrown into an air cooker, or it might be something much more nuanced, but we'll see. So I hope that your meal and your day is going to go your way. And we'll catch you on the next episode.